Sal, I am delighted to welcome you to Stratospheric Leaders, and you and I are relatively new friends. It was our mutual friend, the wonderful Lance Ugler, who invited you to my Stratospheric CEO book launch. I remember connecting with you afterwards and thinking that you had the most incredible energy. And I also remember shortly after the book launch event seeing a LinkedIn post where you were buying a friend a gift for holiday season, and you bought my book, and you'd also did a jumbo order of, was it Rayo's specialty foods for the
Who
holiday
was?
season? And it actually got me looking at your LinkedIn, and it's I really engage with your posts because you have pictures of giraffes and cats and the Bangle songs and cookies. And I love the phrase about the cookies. Some will go down well, some will cause indigestion. And I'm sure we'll go into
Yeah.
many of those things today. But I remember thinking, I want to hear more from you. And so today, here we are on Stratospheric Leaders. Thank you for being here. And I have my pen and paper to hand because I know I'm going to be jotting down as many insights as those who are listening. It's always, I always like to, I mean, look, we'll go through your track record, and you've got an extraordinary career as a world-class trader, as an investor. I want to hear about who are you when you're not in the seat that you sit in. And I was going to ask you, actually, just from based on a recent conversation, a favorite song of yours, because and what are the reasons it's a favorite song?
Well, I love music, and music is a great part of my life. First of all, thanks by the way for having me here. This is fantastic. It's a great opportunity to speak with you, and I appreciate it. I love music. It's one of the things that sort of takes me away from the markets. And there's been many songs that that I identify with, but a song that was written for the Olympics and sung by Whitney Houston is one I think that I identify most with. And Dana Winner is the lady whose version I like the most, but it's called "One Moment in Time." And if you get a chance to listen to the song, it's extraordinary. And also the words itself are tremendous. And to me, um, what it really means in a nutshell is live in the present moment and basically leave nothing on the sidelines, leave everything on the field every single day. And that's very much how I've always lived my life ever since I was a very young person. And so that song epitomizes. If I had a better voice, I'd sing it for you, but maybe not today. Maybe over a glass of wine sometime at Rayo's that you mentioned before.
When you mentioned that song to me before, I Googled it afterwards. And to your point, if people have a chance to listen to it, because there was a line that said in there, like, every day I live, I want to give the very best of me. And
Correct.
there were so many like mic drop lines in there, and I've never really listened to it before. Like, I've listened to it, but I've never really heard the words. And I went back to it after you'd mentioned it to me. And there was another line about I rise and fall, yet through it all, there's one moment in time. So to your point, we only have the present moment. It's really to ground ourselves into that.
It is. And if you can live that way and leave everything on the field, so to speak, then you really are free. And that's what it's all about for me. Um, you know, just living my life and being true to myself, which is what I aspire, which I really aspire to.
The present moment, my children used to watch Kung Fu Panda, and there's a great quote, and I won't, I'll again, without going through the whole quote, but it says, the present moment is a gift. That is why they call it a present, or the present. And yeah, I will thank you for reminding me of
There's
that
actually a
song.
book, The Precious Present.
I have not heard of that.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I'm putting that on my reading list. And you've had a distinguished career, and I would love to hear, what was your first ever job? So before you started in your professional capacity in finance, but first ever job.
So my family were a family of builders, and why I have such a particular affinity for Rails is the Rails family are Sicilian, and restaurant is, and they all came over from various towns in Sicily. And my father was a builder, my grandfather was a builder, and my first job from the time I could walk was carrying a hammer. So I would be on the job site with my dad, and I learned the construction business hands on from day one. And so that was really the first job that I ever had. And that was really from the time I was honestly like 7 years old all the way up through college. I'd work all the summers, and I learned how to, how to work with my hands. I was never in the white collar world. I didn't even know what the white collar world was. And all our family friends were, sort of blue collar folks. The first white collar job I ever got, I think I was 14, and I got a job at a restaurant, local restaurant, as a busboy. And I started as a busboy, and then I ended up as a bit of a waiter as I was growing from 14 to 16. And we used to cater to all business affairs, lunches and dinners. And I see all these fancy people coming in, men and women, with jackets and ties and all dressed up nice. And it was sort of very different to me. And at that point in time, I said, boy, I think maybe someday I'm going to be one of those people having lunch, having dinner, talking at these these business situations, and not the person in the background serving and cleaning and working in the dish as a dishwasher. And that's how I learned my Spanish. I learned, Spanish working in a kitchen, believe it or not. So that was really that was really my first job before I went to college, and then I, obviously moved into the financial world.
And it's interesting that do you call it a busboy? Because what did you call it? Is it a busboy? It's
A
different. If it's
busboy. So you wash the dishes. You're a dishwasher. You take the garbage out. You restack the shelves. You're basically at the absolute very bottom, but you learn a tremendous amount. And to me, I love people that work. I don't care what you do. I think people that work are heroes in any job, any capacity. And so I admire the people that I worked with. Maybe they weren't the most educated, but they were hardworking people. They were family-oriented people, and they were just trying to make a living wage to pay for their children, to try to give their children a better life than the life that they had. Many of them, were new to the country.
You talk about hard work. I speak to my children about hard work as a minimum. Like that is the baseline. It's not a goal. It's not an aspiration. Like hard work is a minimum. And when you talked about that being a busboy, I imagine that that's like an intense environment. High pressure, busy. There's many foundational lessons that have carried through in your career.
Very much so. And actually, one of the first things you'll learn as a busboy, since you're getting yelled at in a foreign language that you don't understand, is you start to pick up culture, and people have different cultures, and you need to try to understand where people are coming from to get along with them. I'd love to see a lot more of that in today's day and age. But understanding where people are coming from and what's the reason for their actions and what drives them, I think is super critical in business and in life, with your family, with friends, with everything.
And I love that, understanding where people are coming from. I think often we can look at the world through our own lens, and actually putting yourself into the shoes of others, whether you're in the classroom, the boardroom, in the kitchen,
Yeah,
so important.
it is. It's super important.
And over the years, you've had a 42, well, I think over a 40-year career on Wall Street.
I
And
have.
I imagine, and again, I keep saying I imagine, I don't want to be presumptuous, but you have developed an eye for talent and exceptional team building. In your in your opinion, what constitutes a winning team? What are those unique characteristics you look for?
Well, very interesting question. One of the things that Bear Stearns that Ace used to always talk about was a PSD degree. So, most of the brokerage firms were hiring MBAs, they were hiring grads from Ivy League schools, they were hiring, the best of the best from the qualifications of education or family background. And Ace Greenberg at Bear Stearns, he didn't necessarily believe in that. He was looking for really hungry people. And so we had a term, he coined it, and it's in the book he wrote called Memos from the Chairman, which I also give out to people on holidays, and I give out to young people when they start the business. And I did when I had big jobs running thousands of people, and I still do it now with my small firm. PSD, poor, poor, smart, with a desire to become rich. And that was the modicum of the Bear Stearns attitude. So really, at the end of the day, what I think builds a great business person is a person that's got tremendous desire. Um, he's got he or she has intestinal fortitude, um, and they're very competitive,
Yeah.
but they have empathy for other people and they're respectful. So I
Yeah.
would, talk about maybe going out to lunch or dinner or a drink with a new candidate or a coffee. And one of the things that I always watch was how that person actually treated the waiter or the waitress or the
Mm.
busboy, right? And if they were rude and disrespectful and felt like they were on a different level than the people that were helping them, they weren't my type of people. And the other thing about a team, everybody can't be an alpha dog. Everybody can't be an A type of attitude. You need people that play roles in a team. And I think if you look at some of the great business leaders, you've interviewed a bunch of them already. I read it in your book as well. I know many of the people that you wrote about. They recognized that there were different roles. I don't even want to say different levels, different roles for different skill sets. And they were able to, and I think I've been able to hire the right type of people for the different roles that encompass a team. And a team truly wins, by working together and not this isn't wrestling, right? This isn't a one-on-one. This is not a singular sport. This is a true team sport, managing money. And I think actually life is too. I mean, even as a father, I think you try to build the team within your own family, with your own children, and you see how your kids kind of move. Some kids move this way, some kids move that way. And you try to bring them all together.
I love what you said there about the fortitude, the competitive nature, and also the empathy. When I look at leaders who ascend, I think it gets to a point where IQ is table stakes. It's that EQ is the difference that makes a difference. How you
Yep.
build rapport, trust, connection, how you communicate, and it's such a critical skill. And I was wondering, you said that you'll take people out, in the interview process, you'll take them to a restaurant, see how they treat the busboy, the waiting staff, because that gives you a sense of character. Are there any key interview questions you typically ask to uncover, I suppose, the truths about an individual?
It's funny because in the old days you could ask all kinds of personal questions. What does your mother do? What does your father do? Do you have any brothers and sisters? Are you married? Do you have a boyfriend or girlfriend? Now, now you're so terrified to ask anything personal. But at the end of the day, for me and the way I run my business, and even when I ran gigantic businesses, it is personal to me. I'm sorry. I'm respectful. Give everybody their space, but business is personal to me. So I do ask about that background, what drives them, how did they learn about the business, why are they excited about the business. I often want to hear about their defeats and their losses. I'm not as interested to hear about the wins. Anybody gets lucky from time to time and does well in something. But what you really want to understand is, what do these people do when they get kicked in the teeth or they get knocked down? Can they get up? Do they have, the fortitude and the desire and the persistence to get back up? That's one of the reasons why, I gravitated towards sports my whole life. I was an athlete my whole life. I was a scholarship athlete in college. I played American football. But even before that, I played all sports when I was young, and it was always about um, the team and working with the team and finding the role that suited you, and trying to bring people together. But it was also very very much about losing. And
Mm.
when you lose, what do you do? And how do you learn from your losses? And as a professional investor and as a professional trader, I lose a lot. I mean, if you're investing, you're going to lose and you're going to win. I'm happy to say that the math will tell you that our career, I've probably made money about 80% of the time. That's pretty high, but there's 20% of the time that I didn't make money. And so what do you do in those times? How do you pick yourself up? How do you get back, on the field? and how do you persevere through those challenging times? And in my life, you know, of 64 years now, there have been many, many challenging times, like tremendously challenging times. Not the least of which, of course, was 9/11, and all sorts of things that have gone on that all of us have gone through. I mean, in my world, in the world of Wall Street, you didn't hear a lot about the 9/11 victims that were the white collar people. You heard about the blue collar people and the first responders, and my heart goes out to all of them, and I knew many of them. But you heard very little about the white collar people, and to me, that was like the Vietnam days when you had the draft in the United States, and a whole town would get drafted, and maybe the whole town's kids didn't come back. Right. For us in our world, I mean, I lost personally over 100 friends. I was on the phone with people, literally on the phone with guys when the plane hit. And so, these are events that you need to figure out. How do you pick yourself up after these type of cataclysmic events that I never thought that I would have in my lifetime? But here's what I've learned, Georgie. Things you think will never happen all the time. They pretty much happen every 7 years, and maybe every 5 years. I was a kid who grew up in the 60s, Vietnam War. I have sisters that are 10 years old. I have four sisters, by the way, four sisters, and just me as a boy. So I've got a lot of female energy around me. And but I grew up with, ringing the alarm and going to sit in the hallway because you were doing the nuclear, in case there's a nuclear strike, you're going to sit in the hallway and put your head down like this. How silly that was. But that's the environment that I grew up with in the 60s. And so, coming through this period, I never thought that some certain events are going to happen. Never in a million years imagined 9/11. In fact, I'll tell you a funny story. Before 9/11, Robert Wolf, who was my boss at UBS, who was a tremendous man, at UBS, and I ran global credit for him. At UBS, we used to do this gigantic event every year for the Super Bowl. And we were doing the Super Bowl, in 2001, and it was whatever. I think it was February of '01, and I'm sitting in this giant stadium with all these very powerful people from Wall Street, names that you would absolutely know, and we're all sitting there. There's probably 30 of us, and at that time, all the patriotic music is playing, and it's really cool. And you're so pumped up to be an American. And just before the kickoff, they shoot off some fireworks, and all of a sudden, the place goes quiet, and you see this gigantic dark shadow fly over the stadium. And we're all going, "What the heck is that?" And looks like a giant bat. Well, it was the stealth bomber, and it flew right over the stadium, but you couldn't hear it. And everybody, just like me, sat back and said, "Oh my goodness, this is extraordinary. We are the most powerful nation in the world. And look at us, all this, and look at us." And only a few months later, the most powerful nation in the world was taken to its knees by a well-organized and very smart and crafty terrorist organization, but taken to its knees. So there you go. Here's your ultimate high. You're pounding your chest, and there's your ultimate low. You lose. I mean, I think I went to 60 funerals. I mean, it was just, obviously horrendous. So what you think's never going to happen can never happen. It happens all the time. It happens on Wall Street. It happens in the markets, and it happens in life. And so you've got to figure out how you're going to adapt from that and move forward, because you don't have a choice, really.
No, I'm just so sorry for your loss. And to your point, that what white collars went through during that time, and it was really interesting what you said there. The things that you think may never happen will at some point happen, and so I think it's to expect the unexpected. And I think we look at the world around us now, and the world is more volatile, complex, ambiguous than ever before. I think we could wake up and look at the news headlines and be in this perpetual state of fear, because we're not always, we can't always plan what we're going to read. And through your, several 40 years on Wall Street. You know, you've led yourself and you've led teams through times of intense volatility. What advice, you know, if you had some emerging leaders who are like, you know, how do I lead in times of uncertainty? What's the advice you'd equip them with?
Yeah. Well, I was thinking about this. In the time I've been on Wall Street since 1982, roughly 27 different firms have actually gone out of business.
Wow.
Names like A.G. Becker, E.F. Hutton, First Boston, Drexel, Shearson, Kidder, Dean Witter, DLJ, Payne Weber, Wasserstein. It goes on and on. L.F. Rothschild, where I worked, Mabon Nugent, where I worked. They're all gone. Many of them merged. Many of them got bought out. Many of them just closed. So there's been a tremendous metamorphosis. And so change is absolutely constant. And as a trader, I named my company Coherence Capital Partners. And to me, coherence is being able to see the forest through the trees, trying to, and you and I talked about this a little bit, trying to raise your vibration level, trying to be empathetic to those around you, understand where they're coming from, and really raise your understanding and your ability to see. I was a running back in college playing American football, and what made me, I think, pretty good was that I had great peripheral vision. I could see the field looking at you, but I could see everything to the side of me, and I could anticipate people moving in and out, the block that this person might make, where this defender was going to come. And I've always been able to anticipate. So to me, that's what coherence is. It's trying to anticipate the behavior and the moods in the market. So when you look at investing, it's fundamentals, it's technicals, it's AI now, but it's also behavioral, and behavioral sciences have a lot to do with the markets and sort of the madness of crowds. So um, if you look at the environment and things that I think have made me successful over a long period of time, is really never doubling down and tripling down and getting bigger into anything that I'm doing that I'm losing in. So specifically to the portfolio, getting bigger in a losing trade, whether it's a long or short, and thinking that I'm right and the market's wrong. I don't do that. Some people are really, really good at that, but I don't catch falling knives. And the people that invest with me expect me to not catch falling knives. And where they put me in their portfolio is the consistent return alpha bucket, not, the bucket that expects to make giant home runs. There are a lot of folks out there that can average down and double down. I don't do it. So in everything that I do, and that has to go with, relationships, friends. You have a friend, you think they're a friend, but you have a couple sort of things that kind of go off the rails a little bit. Do you double down on that friendship? No, maybe. Or maybe you say, hey, maybe we just don't have the synergy. And maybe I want people in my life that are glass half full, not half empty. So you move on. So that whole thing comes around to me personally. I cut my losses quickly. I let my gains run, and I kind of live my life that way.
I love that. Cut my losses right. Cut my losses quickly. What you just said there about friends reminded me of a quote that my one of my coaches shared with me years ago, where he said, "Friends are there for a reason, a season, or a lifetime."
Yes.
I think I wrongly assumed that friends, you kind of take them all with you, and actually, we don't have, none of us have the capacity to take. So it's being okay with that. Sometimes it's a chapter. It's at college. It's a certain job. When your children are a certain age, and that chapter, and that's perfect as it is.
One moment in time.
One moment in, I love that one moment in time. And
Yeah.
I love what you said about change is constant, because I think when we were just, speaking to change, because I think for that is, given the fact it is constant, it is about the ability to adapt, to evolve, to your point, exercise that peripheral vision. For some people that may be fairly natural, that they can see, they've got that wide aperture. For others, it's really finessing that skill, because things are coming at us from many different directions at the moment. And we can't, it's control the controllables, because we can't always control what's happening. You
What does
can
God
control.
say? God laughs at the best laid plans. My sort of word for all that is pivot. I've
Pivot.
I've made a career, really, literally, out of pivoting,
Yeah.
pivoting in my portfolio, pivoting in my business career. Sometimes you just have to pivot and got to keep looking forward, right? So you've got a windshield, and it's huge, right? And you have a rear view mirror. It's kind of tiny. You don't want to spend a lot of time looking in this little rear view mirror. You want to be looking in that windshield and looking forward. And when you're looking forward, you want to see the field. We know, I don't know if you've ever had a chance to drive a race car. I've had a couple of opportunities to do a couple of these racing schools and things like that, which I loved. And they teach you when you're driving on the track, you're not looking here, you're looking there. You're looking, it's like when you're playing athletics, you know, you're not running to where the ball is, you're running to where the ball is going to be. And in life,
Yeah.
if you can,
Yes.
you want to run to where the ball's going to be.
And how often do people do that though? They feel, and as I listen to you, I think it's really about being intentional about running, and being, I suppose, aware that there's like, we've got to be in that present moment to be like, right, where do I need to be, and being intentional about then following that direction.
Yeah, the other side of that would be, well, someone say, "Oh, Sal, you're able to say that now because you're relatively well off. I'm struggling just to make ends meet. I don't have time to be able to see, the forest through the trees." Well, the truth is that you do. I haven't always been in this seat. I was in the exact same seat. I was the busboy. I was the construction worker. I was the landscaper. All those are all admirable jobs. But I kept pushing myself to do more, see further, read more, pray more, and try to understand that there's a lot more to life. I actually truly believe that what we envision becomes reality. And I don't want to mismatch your podcast, but Lance is a great friend of mine, Lance Ugla, and he was, I think, the first fellow that spoke, and he's one of the strong topics of your book. And I think I told you this. I was an investor in Market Group at the very beginning. I was on his board in 2002. Him and Kevin Gould came into my office, and they convinced me to invest for UBS. And years later, when I was trying to decide what I wanted to do after I closed my hedge fund, Lance took me out and said, "I want you to come work for me." And he took out, we're in a restaurant, and he took out a napkin. I still have the napkin. And he wrote down exactly what was going to happen to his company in the next 15 years, where the stock price was then and where it was going to be. And I still carry this thing with me wherever I go. He literally laid the whole thing. He envisioned this entire thing before it ever happened. And he created all of it. And there were people who laughed and scoffed and couldn't believe it. And it was all baloney. And no. And I think the other people that you had on your show all have done iterations of that. And I think that's what's happening. I think Elon Musk is a perfect example of that. Just look at what he and his team are doing and where their visions are. So I think we as human beings have a lot more power than we think we do. And I think to a certain level, we create our own reality.
I 100% agree with you. I have vision boards all around me. You can't see them, but I have vision boards. And what really, the quote that came up for me, and I hope I'm attributing it correctly, is to Leonardo da Vinci, where he says, "I dream my painting, I paint my dream." And that I dream my painting, that's that visualization. What's the unmet future? What is that? What do I want to create? So I dream my painting, and then I paint my dream. And yes, it's about then doing the work, having conversations, putting all those seeds in place. But equally, when you're so clear on your vision and you're doing all the work to make it a reality, it's interesting, those serendipitous moments that the universe seems to work out the how.
I think that's right. I do.
And it's I've when I interviewed the leaders for my CEO book, I one of the things that really struck me as the golden thread between them all is that they visualize, that they manifest their dreams, and whether they
Yes.
would whether they would use the same words, but they're visualizing, they're thinking all the time, every brushstroke on that painting, And out of interest, did you ever go back to Lance to say, look, this is your 15-year plan, and that this is something you've created?
We've talked about it many, many times. He doesn't, he thinks I'm a bit foo-foo with all this type of stuff, except that he practices it as much as I do. So he may not say he believes in it, but he doesn't need to say it because he actually lives it.
Yeah. It's the power, well, again, the power of what's possible when you believe in it.
Yep.
And I want to pivot to, as I said, you've had many decades on Wall Street. What do you think's one thing no one ever warned you about when it comes to leadership?
Well, I always believed that if you're a good person and if you're honest and if you do pretty much everything right, that you will be rewarded. Um, and I always believed that if you had proof behind you, documents and data and all this type of stuff, that it was, and you had irrefutable data and information, that you would be rewarded. But as I learned in business, and as I grew to higher levels of you know positions, if you will, of power, I learned that it's not about if you're always right, because there's someone over you or there's a group over you, and they may have an agenda, and they may not want to know exactly what you're telling them, because they have a particular agenda. So I learned this lesson at one of the very large firms I had, which when that I was in, that I had a very big job in, and I had this situation, and basically I learned the hard way that it doesn't matter always if you're right. And then I learned it a lot with litigation and things like that. Like, attorneys will tell you, and if you're in securities litigation and things like that, you never want to end up going to court, because you just don't know what the opinion is ultimately going to be, or how that opinion is going to come out, or how it's going to be manipulated. So I think that the biggest thing I learned as I became a high level executive is there's a lot of give and take. And even if you're right, maybe you're wrong. And maybe you just take a half a step back and hear where the other people are coming from, and then move yourself accordingly, because it doesn't always matter if you're exactly right. And that was a tough lesson to learn, I'll be honest with you.
And I think sometimes we can be so fixated on winning the argument, but in the process we can lose the relationship, or it can damage our credibility.
Yep.
So I suppose it's really taking a pause to be like, what's the end goal here? What do I want to achieve? And recognizing, okay, well, maybe I need to adapt how I present myself or how I present the facts to try and make it as close to a win-win.
When you're in times of crisis, and I've been in a lot of different crises in my life, to be honest, business wise and some personal and things like that. Everything You want everything to speed up. You want to make all these decisions quick, but the reality is, what you should be trying to do is slow time down.
Mm.
As a boater, there's a saying, slow is pro. And so when you're coming into a volatile situation, you're coming into an inlet, you have, waves and current and all types of things happen, or you have a mechanical problem. Uh, you want to slow down, and you want to think, and you want to try to work things out in your head. As a young fella, I had this tremendous football coach in high school. I went to Half Hollow Hills High School, and I had a coach by the name of Stanley Kowalski, and he was a tough guy, fast, strong, a bit arrogant, and he really, really pushed us as players. And in our workout room, he had all these signs up. And the sign that he used to drag me over, he grabbed me, come here, Naro, because I was a bit of a hothead when I was younger, kid. Drag me over there, in a way you can't do anymore, like by my neck, and stick my face right into a sign. And the sign says, an athlete should keep his feet as long as he can, his head always. And that's something, when that happened, I was maybe 15, 16 years old, and I've never forgotten that. So, in life, in managing money, in the markets, etc., take a deep breath, slow down a bit, try to again see the forest through the trees, um, and don't panic, right? And so I think that is a critical lesson for everybody to learn. And the world has changed so much because now everything is instantaneous. Satisfaction. Push a button and you're on Twitter, or you get Amazon, you can get Uber Eats, you can get everything and never move. Right? Everything is instant satisfaction. And I think that's one of the challenges that younger people have now, to not really understand what it's like for things to take time. So instant satisfaction in a crisis, unless you're super highly well trained, it's time to take a deep breath. And I think that comes across that way everything that I do.
And breathing is always home base, I think, because when we're if we're we're in that anxious mode, then heart rate goes up, breathing rate goes up, blood pressure goes up. And there's a saying, when emotion runs high, intellect runs low. So
Correct.
keeping regulated. The
It's
slowest.
fight or flight, right? That's how we were. That's how we came up: fight or flight.
Yeah. And there's so much here about controlling, it's your emotional regulation. The slowest pro is a new one for me. I hadn't heard that quote, and I love that. It also reminded me of the quote by the Navy SEALs: slow is steady, steady is fast. Because, and I said this to my son this morning on the way to school, because they had a hockey tournament yesterday. They lost in the finals. They were exhausted, but they were trying to go too fast. They were just tonking the ball, not looking where they're going. And I said, look, this is where slow is steady, because actually you can still go fast, but by slowing it things down, then you've got, you're clear in direction rather than being directionless. And I think it's such a valuable reminder that sometimes slowest is the best way. And it might feel that that's completely counter to what you should be doing, but that's where true power resides in those times.
And you said breathing. I mean, breathing is critical. And I don't do it as much as I should. I really try. I practice. I meditate every day, multiple times. I work on my breathing, and still from time to time, I catch myself breathing shallow and not really taking things in. And when I do breathe deeply, I become much more conscious of everything around me, and the markets and everything become so much clearer to me, as
Yeah.
opposed to all hyped up and short breaths and all that.
It's interesting, isn't it? If we all had a camera that was kind of recording us through the day, where we'd actually, if we could observe our body language when we're, because I just saw you on screen then, when we're stressed, we go rigid. So we're already
We do.
we're constricting our airways and our lungs, and then we wonder sometimes, well, we don't make the best decisions, or so there's so much here within our control. Breathing, slow is pro, and just having. And sometimes I put post-it notes on my machine just as a, because sometimes in the moment when you're triggered, you can't always remember the good things because you're in your own head. So it's having a reminder somewhere just to
Yeah.
be like, no, no, slow is pro.
And this is where technology really helps, because I, like many people, wear something that says, "Hey, dummy, your heart rate's running." Or when's the last time you breathe? Let's take a moment. Uh, will you take a moment? By the way, can you stand up? Right. So the technology is absolutely extraordinary, and I've embraced it, and it's really helped me tremendously, tremendously.
And I think many people in the market are data orientated, and these devices, whether it's a Whoop band, an Apple Watch, they
Yeah.
give us data. Sometimes we don't want to see the data because I think it's then holding a mirror up. But when we know better, we can do better. And what you put your attention on expands. So if we're putting our attention on breathing more, standing up more, reduced heart rate, then if we're tracking it, we can be like, hey, are we meeting our goals, or are we falling short? And if we're falling short, what's the reason for that?
Yeah, I agree.
And you mentioned about your watch there, and I think for anyone, I'm not even just going to send financial markets, but I think anyone who has a heartbeat in today's world, it's about having stamina and sustainability, because the world, I know we mentioned change is constant, but the world seems to be moving faster than ever before, and the change just feels at that unprecedented velocity. How do so it is, as a leader, about staying fit for purpose. How do you create that stamina and sustainability? You mentioned meditation, you mentioned but I'd love you to share more.
Um, well, when I turned 40, I was never a great sleeper. And I used to lay in bed and I'd be staring at the ceiling. And when I turned 40 years old, I just decided I'm not going to stare at the ceiling anymore. I'm going to just get up and be productive. So I read or I listen to music and I do things. And then as time has gone on, I've I've changed. I've added to my early morning routine. So I've always, for many, many, many years, I run international businesses, and while I was usually based out of the U.S., although sometimes I was based out of the U.S. and London, and even in the U.S., I would normally beat the London people to work because I get up at 2:30. I'm working at 2:30, 3 o'clock. We all know the time differences and stuff. So my day starts super early. Um, I may be talking to people in Europe about the markets. I may be talking to research analysts, talking to the guys we have, and then I go for like a 6 to 8 mile walk every morning. And while I'm walking, I'm talking to people. I'm talking about the portfolio, or I'm listening to some extraordinary podcasts like yours. I've been listening to your stuff, the few that you have out so far, and so I've been doing that. And so I try to make my time really, really productive. Some people really don't need a lot of sleep. I guess, maybe at some point it'll catch up to me, but I just try to keep my mind really, really active. And I try to sort of be productive with my time. And the stronger I feel, the healthier I feel, then I think the better person I am, husband, father, grandfather, portfolio manager. I don't have a boss per se. My boss in my business is all my investors. I mean, they can fire me tomorrow, and basically, they're looking at performance. And so I'm in a performance-based business. So you've got to keep yourself really operating at a high level. And it's challenging to do that all the time. I always said that the business of Wall Street is very much like being a professional athlete. It's high notoriety, hopefully high compensation, a lot of press and all that. You get to go places and do things. But the difference is that we never have an off season.
Mhm.
You have to perform every day, particularly as an active manager, as a hedge fund manager, or managing an active portfolio. So I'm not investing for the next 30 years. I'm not. I don't have the same approach, let's say, as Warren Buffett did or whatever. We're trying to drive return on a consistent basis, and really we're competing every single day. And it's not just me; it's the whole industry, and it's difficult, and you never get an actual off season. Now, no one's going to complain and cry, for the Wall Street guys or anybody who's in that profession that lives under um, that intense spotlight and performance guidelines. But at the end of the day, you've got to figure out a way to keep your performance up, and that's why a lot of people sort of burn out. I am absolutely not at the end of my career, but I'm certainly, I'm in the later stages of Wall Street, if you will. I mean, most of the people that I talk to are in their 20s, 30s, and 40s. Even a 50-year-old person is young to me. And you just got to keep yourself moving. You have to integrate technology. And the technology that we're seeing now is just extraordinary, from the watch to AI, and how you're moving that into your process, et cetera. And you just have to stay really excited. And I never had to motivate myself because I'm just excited all the time about it. I mean, I think I'm living in the most extraordinary time. I'm incredibly grateful to have been in this world at this time with all the changes that we have going on, and the technology. And I'm super excited for the future of humanity, to be honest.
What really comes up for me, you said the words there, you keep your performance up. And I think there's something there about that'll be different to everyone. For you, there's a 6 to 8 mile walk, it's listening to your podcast. But it is that Aristotle quote, knowing thyself is the beginning of all wisdom, really knowing, what are the resourcing practices, strategies that you need to put in place so you can stay at your best. And I really heard you and felt you when the excitement you spoke to. It is about also, look, and it's not always possible, but where possible, find a job that excites you and you enjoy, because life is the journey, and you want to enjoy the ride as much as possible.
Passion.
Yeah.
Passion is a term that people need to embrace more. It sounds funny, passion, embrace, but you know, I think being passionate as a father, all I want from my children, for my children, is to be happy, to find love and to find passion, be passionate about, their life, their spouse, their children, their career. To me, that is the epitome of success, right? Seeing the people that you love have a passion for their life, and not view themselves as a victim, right? But always
Yeah.
view themselves as a glass sort of half full. And it's sad. I have a lot of friends, and I'm involved with a lot of charities, that are surrounded and centered by sort of victims. Some of them are folks that had things happen to them, and others are just unfortunate circumstances. And I think it's a challenge to try to help turn those people's mindset around. It's literally changing the way you think, and it's
Yeah.
easier said than done. And believe me, we've all had our dark moments of the soul. Me as much as anybody else. You just have to persevere through that.
And in those moments where, whether it's confidence, you talked about mindset, I think I said about earlier on, if we have a heartbeat, but equally, if we have a heartbeat, we'll have experienced moments of self-doubt, confidence crises, dark holes of, how, in those moments, how do you, I don't know what the question, it's kind of, how do you talk to yourself? What do you do in those moments?
I don't talk to myself. I actually pray. I
Okay.
pray. I mean, I'm not a religious person, but I'm a very spiritual person. So I express gratitude to God, to you know the universal mind, whatever you want to call it. I express gratitude to my ancestors who worked so hard and took chances coming from other countries to come to this country for me to be in a position to be here now. I thank my parents who have passed away. I thank my in-laws who gave me this beautiful who gave me their beautiful daughter as my wife. I pray, and I take a deep step back and I say how lucky I actually really am to be here now, and I just try to be grateful for it. And through that appreciation, I normally can see that there really is light on the other side, even though it felt so dark.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because gratitude, if any of us paused for a moment and took a moment to be grateful, the fact we woke up this morning, the fact that you've got eyes that see, ears that hear, the fact that you can sit at your desk, there is we've all got stuff to be grateful for. And I think we can, well, I don't think it's easy to find ourselves in that constant throughput of life. And gratitude it could be 30 seconds, a minute. It doesn't have to be a big direct debit of time, but can be
Correct.
profoundly impactful.
Yeah, I think it changes your life if you can view it that way. I'm super thankful for my family, for my friends, for meeting you, for people like Lance have been in my life. And you said before, people are in your lives at certain moments in time. It's extraordinary. And you need to also learn, like you said, they're not always going to be there necessarily. You hope so, but that's not really the way it works out. And you have to recognize and appreciate that moment in time. That was a great relationship. And now, for whatever reason, it's passed. And you have to keep moving on.
And in your career, have you had a mentor? Who have been we've mentioned Lance, but who have been really the instrumental people in helping or having a part in you becoming you?
Well, this will surprise you. So I mentioned Robert Wolf at UBS. Obviously, Lance has been my partner and friend for a long time. Um, I actually was first hired in the business of Wall Street by a woman. I've had actually many women who have been instrumental in my business career. It was a woman uh, uh, by the name of Irene Pappas, who worked for Dreyfus in 1982. And I had been a scholarship athlete in school, and I had hurt myself as a senior, and I didn't know what I was going to do. And I realized my athletic career was over, and I sort of walked over to the college guidance counselor co-op office, and they were recruiting for Dreyfus Service Corporation. And so I put my 2 cents in, and the lady that was running the co-op area took a shining to me, and she said, "I'm going to introduce you to my friend Irene Pappas. She runs this Dreyfus Service Corporation." And I went and met her, and we hit it off, and she hired me. And I was actually, I think, probably the youngest person that Dreyfus ever hired to get their Series 6, which is the license that you need to sell mutual funds and stuff. So she hired me. And about 7 or 8 months later, I moved into work in the city. I worked for a legend in an area, built for a guy who was a legend by the name of Monty Gordon. I learned a lot at Dreyfus, but I realized that the people at Dreyfus didn't make a lot of money, and I wanted to make a lot of money. I decided that, if I'm going to be in this business world, that I really want to try to maximize return. So I went to Irene and I said, I'm going to leave, Irene. I'm going to find a different job. And she said, we really like you here. You should stay. But if you go, don't look back, move forward, and go super hard. And you're the type of person, Sal, that's probably never going to be satisfied. Someday you're going to maybe regret, moving on, but you should move on. Ultimately, I had a couple different careers, and then I ended up going to work for a company called Maybon Nugent, and another lady, Cynthia Walpole. She was a partner with this guy, Jim Philippus, who was a Vietnam vet, actually. And those two people took me under their wing, and they taught me everything about trading and understanding fundamentals and credit. And so I was so blessed to have those folks as mentors. And then later, when I became a mentor at Bear Stearns, I actually had a tremendous woman that worked for me. Her name was Lisa Shepard, and she was one of the only female traders on Wall Street. And we're going way back now. I met Lisa in 1984. And so I've been so, blessed to have, this female energy and women around me and work with these people. So, that's how I actually started on Wall Street. I got a break from those two women earlier on, and then later on, sort of, mentors. I've always I've always gravitated towards people who were humble, as I said to you, and who had lasted the test of time. So I was, young. I was a flash in the pan. I came up and made a lot of money, and I was this really successful young trader. And I met this at the time 45-year-old trader, and I was sitting down working with him, and people say, "Oh, Sal, you look, you're so much better than him, and this and that." And I'm like, that guy's 45. He's been doing this for 20 odd years. I'll tell you that I'm a really good trader or a great trader if I can last the test of time, all those ups and downs, because you're not winning all the time. And how do you pick yourself up? So my aspiration was to last the test of time. And I still think I have a lot of time left, but I think I've done that. So yeah, that's kind of how I look at it.
Taking a chance is something that really comes up for me there. It's putting yourself out there, believing in yourself, taking that step. And also the importance of who we surround ourselves with, because none of us are an island. We all need the help, the support, the advocacy, the checks and balances of other people around us. And I think it's seeking those people out, because and also asking for what we need.
Asking who?
Exactly. I mean, and the key thing is like who, and it's people you trust and people whose expertise that you value. And I think I'll go back to what I said earlier. Sometimes we're so busy in the doing, and actually it's that slow is pro, slowing things down. Who are the people that I need to connect with? What is my ask of them? Because a single insight can really put you on a completely different pathway.
And the ultimate ask is the big guy upstairs. Like, direct me, guide me. What should I be doing? The idea that we all have plans for our lives is a little silly, right? I mean, you want to plan, but things happen. So you really, in my view, you have to trust. You have to trust in God and trust in what you believe, whether it's God or doing the right thing or whatever term you want to use. But you have to understand that there are many things way beyond yourself that you just cannot control. Going back to my Super Bowl story with the B-1 bomber flying over, the stealth bomber flying over, and we're the most powerful. And a few months later, we're not, right.
And things can change, as you're sharing there. Things can change so quickly and in a heartbeat. And we could speak for such a long time here, and I would love to invite you on a future episode. And for this episode, where I'd like to kind of conclude it with is, you have so much wisdom, insight, stories, experiences. If you could go back to that, say maybe the 13-year-old Sal, what is the stuff you'd want him to know? What wisdom would you impart?
I was so blessed in having fantastic parents, and they gave me sort of every opportunity, and they pushed me around education, and so, you know, I don't know how much, honestly, I would change uh, from what I was originally taught. I mean, look, I've made some, sort of dumb mistakes in my life, but really, be true to yourself, which I've always been. And like I said, the thing I leave you with is just leave everything on the field. Don't leave it on the sideline. Don't have the excuse. I can't stand. I woulda, coulda, shoulda. It just, it's just not a place for me to be. I make mistakes. I recognize them and I move on. I cut my loss, whatever it is. Move forward. Don't dwell on your on the things that that you've made a mistake in, or you haven't achieved. Just keep moving forward. And I kind of think, honestly, towards you, I've really done that. I don't know what I would have really done differently. Maybe if I had gone to a much better school, then sort of where would I be? I was recruited by Yale, but I didn't go because my girlfriend went to Post and I wanted to go to Post. And so I don't know. Just I'd say just let it rip in your life. Just do the right thing by people, and just try to, excel in every moment that you can, because it is really precious. It is the precious present.
One moment in time.
Well,
Thank you so much, Sal. It has been an absolute joy and a privilege spending the last hour with you, and I look forward to many more inspired conversations.
very kind of you to have me on. I'm glad we coordinated our clothing.
We
I
did
think we both
purple.
look marvelous. And thank you so much.
Thanks, Sal.
Thank you.